So, Amber, welcome at this GreenTalk. We're very happy that you wanted to join us today. First of all, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. So I'm Amber. I am 31 years old. I moved to Amsterdam in 2007 to study at the University of Amsterdam and been here ever since, not planning on leaving anytime soon. And I am the impact manager at the student hotel, which means that I'm responsible for our sustainability strategy for all our hotels and our headquarters.
Okay, nice. So there you almost answered the second question already, which is what is your responsibility as an impact manager? What are your day-to-day tasks?
So the student hotel is based all over Europe, and we currently have 15 hotels and 2 headquarters, and we are planning on building 15 more hotels in the next 3 to 5 years. So we are growing rather rapidly, and it's very important that we do so consciously. So for me, as the impact manager, I need to make sure that our sustainability strategy is ambitious enough, but also fits our ambition and our options, of course, because we were founded as a commercial company. So you always have to deal with different perspectives and needs. And so what I look at is we have a sustainability strategy that focuses on 3 things. We act, we connect, and we inspire. The first one, we act. We ideally, what we like to see is that people come into the hotel, that they are inspired and that they leave there and that they go out and change the world for good, which is great. But if you want to inspire others, then you need to make sure that you set the right example. So for We Act, we focus on everything that we as a company can do ourselves to contribute to a more sustainable world. We own all our buildings, so that gives us a lot of opportunity to already think about how we construct our buildings and think of, for example, implementing renewable energy sources into our hotel design. If you look at our latest hotel in Delft, there we created the ground floor based on circular design principles to better understand how does that work and how could we in the future build an entire hotel based on circular design principles. So in our real estate, we already have quite some opportunities to work on sustainability. Then we have our hotel operations, of course, because once the hotel opens, we need to make sure that we operate it as sustainably as possible. So we have a big focus on waste management, energy management, but we also have our internal flight policy, for example, because as you can imagine, if you're based in Europe, then you need to travel, but how often do we need to travel, and do we need to go everywhere all the time with everyone, or could we also maybe just go by yourself for a couple of days and then come back? The second pillar that we then have is We Connect. And with We Connect, we very much look at how can we multiply our impact. On your own, you can only do so much, but if you bring in different partners, different people, then you can actually do a lot more. And we also think it's important to work with every type of what we call tribe or community. So we like to work together with our students, we like to work together with our coworkers, but also with neighborhood organizations or national organizations. And together we try to create as much impact as possible. So there, for example, we have the TSH Changemakers Challenge, which is a competition run by us focusing on engaging students on societal issues. But we also work on creating an inclusive workforce and looking at diversity and inclusion and hiring people with a distance to the labor market. Then our third pillar is We Inspire, and that very much has to do with our bigger picture. So ultimately, we want to see change in the industry. So we spend a lot of time doing research, sharing best practices. We're part of a lot of networks where I tell our story. And we very much look at how can we work together also with other hotel change. So my day-to-day job in all of this is to make sure that all the different departments that work at TSH know what our sustainability strategy is and start working on implementing all the projects that we have under waste, under flying, because as you can imagine, it is impossible for me to be at 15 places at the same time. So I need the help of the hotel teams, of the HR department, of the real estate department to help me implement those projects. So I do a lot of research and preparing, and then I do a lot of monitoring and managing and meeting up with all the different departments to hear how it's going, what could be improved, any feedback that they have for me.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. So you just told us that you're also working on inspiring others to become more sustainable. And in one of your interviews, you gave you were talking about activating the students to separate waste in the kitchen by your design strategy. What does this strategy look like?
So it's quite a project. It sounds very easy. So our long-term goal, we've actually redefined that over the summer, is that by 2030 we want to be a zero waste company. And that doesn't mean that there's no longer any waste, but it means that every item that we produce as waste, basically, we can properly recycle or reuse. So it doesn't go to landfill or is incinerated. But that means that recycling is a big part of what we do. And so we already had in most of our locations, we already had different bins for waste separation, both in the hotel and outside where our suppliers would deal with it. But looking at the data, we learned that the students were not separating their waste accordingly. So we found a lot of paper waste and a lot of glass waste still going into the residual bin. We realized, especially for glass, I don't know if you know, but you have those underground containers and they only have the hole where you can put one glass bottle in at a time. Turns out our students are slightly lazy, so they just put all the glass bottles in a bag and they threw it in the residual waste because they're like, it takes too long to throw it in the hole. So we were like, okay, but you have all the facilities, but somehow it's not enough. So we then basically went back to the drawing board and we were like, okay, we must assume nothing. We must think simple and we must think of every single step and make it as easy as possible for them to separate their waste. So we used behavioral science and nudging techniques to go from, okay, you are in your kitchen, you are generating waste, how do you want separated responsibly over there? And then you go through the hotel, you need to go outside, what do you need? So we created posters in the student kitchens and every waste stream has its own color based on national guidelines because per country the colors are slightly different, and also what goes in and what doesn't go in. And so the colors and the logos you see again on the bins in the kitchen. So you have the poster and then you have the bins. The bins are on wheels so that you can roll them down because carrying the bags too heavy and then they get lazy again. So you roll them down, you go outside, and then at almost every location outside, you once again see the same signs above the containers or also on the containers showing, okay, you have glass, glass goes here, you have plastic, plastic goes here. We then also created an onboarding document, both for our hotels, because they needed to learn what the new facilities were, as for the students, introducing why we separate waste. That comes with an instruction video where I explain why we do what we do and some of the items, what goes where. And then a big part of what we do is monitoring. So especially in the first months, you only get a couple of weeks for them to work on their behavior and change their behavior, because once they've gotten used to something, they're unlikely to change anytime soon. So especially in those first weeks, we very critically monitor how they're doing. And if it's not going accordingly, then we try to change it right away. And if it is going the way it's supposed to, then we also try to reward them because it's part of their, what we call their kitchen management. But yeah, it sounds very simple. Waste, 5 streams, put the bins there and you go. But it's quite a project to actually implement it and ensure that they know what we're after.
Yeah, that's really a big project. And by this monitoring, is that also the way how you measure the results of this project? And are there results available already?
So we share most of our results through our impact report that we publish once a year. And we're planning as of next year to work also more with monthly updates where we can give more information to the public. But internally, we already have a monthly newsletter to all our colleagues. So there we already share, okay, the bins have now been implemented and this is how we're doing. So we get data from our different waste suppliers and we track the data to see the percentages and to see whether we are getting better at separating. Because of course, the better you do, the less residual waste there should be because everything goes into one of the assigned bins. Yeah, we track that. I get monthly updates from the suppliers, from the waste handlers, and then I have my own monitor where everything comes together to show, okay, how is it going in this location? How are you doing? And you can then also see if there are outliers, because of course, if someone's been quite steady at, I don't know, 70% residual waste, and suddenly it's 90% residual waste, that's also a sign for us to check in with the hotel and say, hey, what's happening? Was it just a very busy month or is something changing or etc.? So the data monitoring is a big part of us tracking of whether the ideas that we have actually work.
Okay, cool. And earlier you also mentioned the business flight policy you have.
Yep.
You were supposed to cut the carbon footprint by 2021. And I think this may be easier because of the current pandemic situation. Have your sustainability efforts changed during this time?
So we introduced our flight policy in our previous fiscal year. So we follow the academic year. So our year runs from September to August, just like an academic year does. So in fiscal year 2019-2020, we introduced the new flight policy. And the idea was that based on the previous year, we would set a benchmark and then determine how much we wanted to reduce our emissions. So for 1920, we had said we're going to reduce our emissions by 20%, and then 2021 another 10, and 21-22 another 10%. So that by 2023, you would have reduced your emissions about 40%, considering that you as a company are still planning on growing. So we were actually quite happy with those numbers and started to monitor it. But then, of course, because of Corona, suddenly we weren't allowed to fly at all from March, at least until June. Yeah, that for us was a nice, well, for the flight policy, it was a nice side effect of Corona, because we actually reduced our emissions by 33% this year. So that's 13% more than we had anticipated. After evaluating the numbers, we decided not to correct the output based on Corona. So what you can do is, of course, say, okay, this was the track that we're on. Assuming that we would have followed that track, that's the number that we would have ended up. And that would not be the same number as we have now, of course. But we said, let's just stick to the number that we actually have. So the minus 33%, and base the next year's 10% on the 33%. So in that sense, our ambitions have increased. Because we are now planning to reduce more than we had planned originally in setting our targets. But looking at the current situation, of course, we don't know what will happen with Corona. So flying at this time is still quite limited within the company. And because of Corona, we've seen that you are indeed very capable of working remotely and doing a lot of meetings online, and new train lines opening up. So the train to Amsterdam and London is now working. That makes us feel that this should be doable for us. So that's why we said, let's just stick to it and become a bit more ambitious.
Okay, interesting. Then I have an audience question that someone from our Instagram asked, and that is, do you have a strategy for personal care items such as shampoo and soap? Do you offer plastic bottles for new guests?
Good question. So we actually started with that last year. 2019, 2020, where I wanted to look at amenities. So amenities as a whole is a big project because I think you can see the difficulty of combining sustainability with guidelines of a hotel. We are a 4-star hotel chain, and the higher your star rating, the more services that you need to offer your guests. That's just part of, if you want to get the rating, you need to oblige to certain criteria. And so as you can imagine, the more stars that you're after, the more services and the more you need to pamper your guests. So amenities is something that we cannot get rid of. You need to offer them. But what you offer and how you offer is something that you can consider. So we started to not put everything in the hotel room by default, but we have it at the front office, at the desk. So if you walk into your room, you will have a sign that says, if you forgot something, please come down, and then we'll give it to you. And that, of course, prevents guests, happy guests, from thinking we have some free amenities to take home. And that, of course, saves a lot in mini waste that you can prevent. Step 2 was that this year we started looking at what can we change in our amenities? Are there better amenities that we can offer? So a couple of things that we started with that we're testing at the moment is we had the little soap bars, which of course you can only use once or twice, and then you have to discard them because you cannot give new guests a used soap bar. So that's quite a wasteful product. So we've replaced that with a soap pump on the sink. which could last up to 3 months, I say from the top of my head. And then, unfortunately, because of health and safety regulations, you still need to throw away the bottle. But throwing away one bottle of recycled plastics is a lot better than throwing away the paper, the plastic that the soap bar was wrapped in, plus the soap bar after 2 nights use. So that's an improvement that we're making. And we are also testing new amenities. So in our hotels in Delft and in the latest one in Bologna, we now have amenities instead of plastic, they are made from cornstarch. So we have a cornstarch razor blade and toothbrush and everything that you need to have. And so the amenity itself is no longer from plastic, but from cornstarch, and the bag is of recycled paper. So we are testing them now in our new hotels, and if satisfied, then we'll roll it out in all hotels, and that will make a lot of difference. Hopefully, in the latest impact report, we'll be able to give an update as to how much plastic, how much emissions we've actually diverted from by changing. And for the upcoming year, we're going to continue on this search and look at some other amenities in the room, such as the water bottle and what would be, or the throwaway bottle that you now usually still get, the plastic bottle. So we're going to look into what are the alternatives and what can you offer in the hotel. So it's definitely a search that we've started and that we're continuing on, because it seems they seem like small things, but if you remember that we have 15 hotels and every hotel has at least 350 rooms, then amenities can be a big part of your waste in our case.
Okay, nice. So you've just mentioned a lot of very cool projects. Which is the area in which you feel the student hotel is having the best positive impact on the world?
On the world, I think we are. I think the biggest impact that we are trying to create, and that I think we're pretty good at, is linking our efforts to our communities. I always say you can create the most sustainable building in the world, but if the people inside don't know what's happening and if they don't know how to treat it, because you need to treat it a certain way, then all your work will be for nothing. So a lot of our time is spent engaging our community. That's what you saw with the example for waste management. We cannot do it without them, but we also feel that by engaging them, they better understand what we are doing, and we can enthuse them to join us on this journey, and then indeed hopefully also go home and make some changes themselves. So what I think we're very good at is linking the sometimes more abstract or scientific projects to our communities and show what it means to them and how they can contribute.
Okay. And I was wondering, where do you get your inspiration from? Are there, for example, any other hotels that inspire you, or maybe inspire you to not be like them?
I don't think I necessarily look at other hotels and go, ooh, I do not want to be like them. But I definitely look at what other hotels are doing. Like I mentioned before, we also work together with a lot of hotels, also in Amsterdam, for example, and we share best practices and look at what they do. I think two hotels that I find interesting is you have it's called the boutique hotel, the Green Host Boutique Hotel in Yogyakarta in Indonesia. I was there 2 years ago, and I dragged my mom there. I was like, we're going to stay in this hotel because it's sustainable and eco-friendly. But luckily, it wasn't like the worst case scenario where you need to sleep on a wooden bed. So mom could deal with it. But in the hotel, you saw that they had incorporated different elements of sustainability. So in their design, they worked with a lot of recycled wood. They had a lot of bamboo amenities. They had a big pool. But the pool was a saltwater pool, so that you don't have to use chlorine, which is, of course, a chemical. And they had a lot of green, so they had mint and all these herbs, and they served as decorations, but they also served as supplies for the kitchen. So there you saw that every element was thought of, which I thought was very inspiring. And another hotel that does something similar here in Amsterdam. Now, unfortunately, they've had to close, but that's due to Corona, and hopefully they can reopen soon. But QO Hotel near the Amstel Station, their entire design is circular. So that's even better than just sustainable, because they've thought of every process. And so they have reused the concrete that came from the Shell building in Amsterdam North. And they have their own garden, rooftop garden, where they have an aquaponic system for the fish. And so they have an a la carte menu downstairs to prevent too much waste, but the food that is wasted is food for the fish upstairs, and then the fish can be used to prep for meals. And so there they've really thought of every element. Also in the design of the building, it's gorgeous. And that, I would say, really is the ultimate. If you can build these kinds of hotels, self-sustainable and self-reliant hotels, I think, yeah, you have something very cool there, and that's definitely going to be the future. And for TSH, that is not something that we can do right now, because it's also a very big one-off project, and we are of course trying to build a whole lot of projects. But it is something that I look to for inspiration and look at, okay, how do they look at food? How do they look at waste? What do they do with it? Who do they work with? So I've been lucky enough to be in touch with them quite regularly to discuss how we can all move forward in that quest to become more sustainable.
Okay, cool. So as you just mentioned, you can't do anything at the same time, and you have to focus on smaller projects, or well, not small, but you can do anything. So what is, according to you, the biggest sustainability challenge awaiting the student hotel in the future? Or
I think for the future, it's going to be for us to grow consciously. Like I said, we still have 15 hotels in the making, but at the same time, the real estate industry worldwide is responsible for 40% of the world's emissions. So our industry is a heavy polluter. And so how are you going to combine being in an industry that drastically needs to change with the fact that you still want to build 15 more hotels or refurbish some existing buildings into hotels? And so the challenge of growing without leaving like an environmental path of destruction behind you, that is really going to be our biggest challenge, which is why I'm very enthusiastic about newer projects such as TSH Delft, where we have started to look at, okay, if we want to have a minimal impact on the environment, how should we look at our design? How should we look at how we construct our buildings? But that will definitely be the biggest thing. And what we want to make sure is that we stay ahead of the curve, and that we don't necessarily have all these beautiful new hotels. And then, for example, because of the EU Green Deal, legislation changes and suddenly we need to change everything in our hotel. So for us, it's really about learning fast right now, and becoming better at, okay, how do we get to net zero energy buildings?
okay, and well, I can imagine that as an impact manager, there's a lot of responsibility and pressure on you. What's in your opinion the hardest issue as an impact manager in your opinion?
I think for me, so like I said, we weren't founded as a sustainable company. We're a commercial company that has always cared about sustainability and has in recent years created an entire department and really stepped up their game. But that does mean that you are trying to change an existing system, because the student hotel system was already there. And I think in general, whenever you try to bring change, that's no easy task, because change means rethinking, redesigning. So I think for me, the biggest challenge is to combine the ambitions that I have, and well, it's not necessarily combining, aligning the ambitions that I have with the already commercial operations of the hotels, and look at, okay, how do they link, and where do we find common ground, and can we merge them and find synergy in such a way that it makes sense, or do I need to stand my ground and say, no, this is more important than this is, so we need to rethink how we look at stuff. And so there's a lot of balancing happening, and there's a lot of stakeholder management happening. So for me, it's also very important that I understand what drives the different departments, what the heads of department, I should say, what drives their influences and what drives their decision making. Is it about being stuck in your way, like this is how we've always done it? So is it just resistance to change, or are you scared for the financial value? Is it in branding and marketing? So what are your drivers that makes you doubt whether this is something we could do? And then it's up to me to make sure that I build a case to show it's okay, we're going to add value, I've thought everything through, this is what the financial impact is, this is what the commercial and the branding marketing impact is. So I always say it's a lot of stakeholder management, Sometimes I spend half my week just drinking coffees with people and talking, because a lot of that will ensure that we can grow our sustainability efforts.
Yes. Okay. Um, in all these projects, do you have one you're very passionate about or something you're very excited about?
I think so there's two projects that spring to mind. One is the Changemakers Challenge, which I already mentioned briefly, um, uh, because the vibe and the motivation of the students is very exciting. So it's a competition whereby we challenge students to form a team and work on a business case of a social entrepreneur. And we link them up with a TSH coach, so that's one of my colleagues, who will guide them from initial idea to actual solution. And throughout the challenge, so it's a very interesting trajectory, because the challenge itself runs from May, June, but January till May we are prepping. So we first find the 10 business cases that they can apply for. Then there's a big activation campaign. So it really is a big project in a sense, because you spend almost half a year on it. And then comes the actual competition for 6 weeks. And the students then have a kickoff session, and so we get to meet them. They get to introduce themselves, why they signed up. Then they immediately start working, because all of them are super eager to win. And then you have the co-creation session, and so you link them up with their TSH coach, their social entrepreneur, but also with some additional colleagues of mine who are just interested in thinking along for a day. And then you have the big finale, where you have these teams who prepped their pitch to perfection. They only have 5 minutes on the dot, and they present what they've worked on. You have a judge and they ask questions, and then you have the winner. And the whole vibe of everyone is there because they want to do good, everyone is excited, everyone is motivated. So the vibe of the challenge, although it is a very big project, is a lot of fun to do, and it's very rewarding. And you often see that the students, regardless of whether they win, they stay in touch with the case owners that they work with. So that's also cool to see that the longevity is actually guaranteed. So that's an existing project that I'm very excited about, because it just gives me a lot of energy. Another big project that I'm very much looking forward to for us as a company, but that's a new project that we're going to start with this year, is to set science-based targets. And science-based targets are targets on your greenhouse gas emissions that are in line with science, to ensure that that we keep global warming under 2%, as was discussed in the Paris Climate Agreement. And so that really is your long-term commitment to look at, okay, how can we grow consciously, and how can we have that minimal impact on the environment? So I very much look forward to that process of first figuring out what it means for us, and then actually getting the targets validated, and then say, okay, so this is our path. Because once they've validated the targets, then you will know, in our case, for the next 10 years, what we need to do. So it'll be a great guideline, and I look forward to working on that this year.
Okay, nice. Those really sound like interesting projects. I was wondering if people who are listening right now are interested in doing the Changemaker Challenge. Is it still possible, or where can they sign up?
So the idea is that we're going to start with the 3rd edition next year, so 2021. And they should be able to sign up as of February, March. That's when the sign up will open again. What I think is best is, if they are interested, that they already reach out to me. I'm sure that you can, in the notes, leave my email address or something to indicate that they're interested, and then we'll add them to the mailing list and keep them informed on any developments.
Okay, nice. That would be very cool. So then we're almost at the last question. The question I still have is, how did you come to work at this position? What is your background, your educational background?
So I studied at the University of Amsterdam as well. I did a bachelor's in human geography and urban planning, and I did a master's in international development studies. During both those studies, I learned more about corporate social responsibility, about CSR, and about how companies can be involved in making a positive contribution to society in any way or form. And I already found that during my studies, I was interested in that aspect of companies not only there for profit, but also to give something back, and not just to give a big check for a photo op, but really look at like structural investments and engagements. So that's how CSR first came on my journey, basically. But then, of course, going from a bachelor's in human geography and urban planning and a master's in IDS, and you're done with your studies, what's your title? What do you do? So going from I have this idea and I like these things to an actual job was not as straightforward as you'd think. Pretty quickly after my studies, I ended up at a company called 1% Club. And at 1% Club, I learned a lot more about CSR. And I got to work together with a lot of CSR managers from other big companies, working on their strategies and how to specifically engage their employees for doing good, basically. So at that company, I had the opportunity to develop myself. I had a great manager learning me all the project management skills and the strategic skills. And we further developed that and my knowledge on CSR and being able to look in the kitchen of so many other companies was great for me because I got a feel of what it meant to be a CSR manager. So then 6 years in at 1% Club, I realized I don't necessarily want to advise other CSR managers anymore. I want to be one myself and work on the projects. So that's when my search for a position started. There aren't many of them. I also work by myself. I do not have a team, so opportunities to become a CSR manager are not broadly available. But luckily, my predecessor at TSH was leaving, and she was looking for someone to take over. And I decided to jump on the chance. And what I liked about the strategy of TSH at the time was that they did have a vision for what they should focus on and how they should grow, but it wasn't set in stone. And that was great for me because that allows me to leave my mark on the plans as well and be creative and make it grow. So that's how I ended up at TSH.
Okay, cool. So it's so interesting because everyone I'm talking with has such a different background, and that shows that wherever you're from, if you really want to do something like this, I think you can do it. So if you have, do you have any advice for students aspiring to go into your line of work? What would it be?
I think I would give them two pieces of advice. I think the first one for me is to think about what you want to do in sustainability. So I get a lot of eager and interested students coming up to me and they say, I love what you're doing. I also want to work in sustainability. Do you have a book that you can recommend, or what would you advise me? But the thing is, and I'm sure that you've noticed that through your interviews as well, that sustainability is an umbrella term for everything related to contributing to a better world, be it societal or environmental. So first step for yourself is to look at, okay, but what interests me about sustainability? Is it the environmental side? Is it indeed very much about emissions and trees and how nature and biodiversity? Or is it more the societal side, the behavioral science, the nudging, the engaging the people? Maybe it's even more specific, interested in plastics or interested in waste. So I think first thing for anyone that is interested in working in sustainability is to just think of what does that mean for me? What do I find important? I think the second step is that I would advise you to, meet with a lot of people to get a feel of what it means to work in sustainability, but also for yourself, think of how do I want to be involved in sustainability? So you can be a sustainability manager like I am. That will often mean that you work at a more commercial company and you try to make it more sustainable. But you can also, for example, work at social enterprises or bigger companies that have their sustainability ingrained in their business operations, such as Patagonia or Tony's. And you could be a sales manager at Patagonia or a project manager at Tony's. And so you're working at a company that tries to contribute to a better world. So you're still involved in sustainability, but on a different level and in a different way. So I think those two things are definitely something I can recommend because it'll help you better define and better help you in your search for a job once you are done. because in general, indeed, it is just very broad. And if you are interested in managing projects and you want to do that at a cool company, then your search is different from I want to be a CSR manager somewhere.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. Is there anything you would like to add since we have had all of our questions?
Well, I told you this before when we spoke on the phone. I really like that you are trying to give insights into what you can do and what it means if you are interested in working in sustainability, because I agree it's not necessarily something, well, I have to say, so in my time, you couldn't even study sustainability. It wasn't a thing. Now there's more and more studies popping up, and there's sustainable business and there's sustainable business courses, etc. So you have an opportunity to already specialize yourself during your studies, but I don't think you have to. I think it very much depends on where your interests lie, how willing your willingness to learn, and what I see, I envy the newer generation because they have a lot more opportunities to already delve into these topics, and it's become a lot more common practice, and it's being normalized already in such a way that I find very inspiring, because I feel that you are already being triggered to do something with this from an earlier age than I was at the time, and I think that will really better our chances of getting to a more sustainable world. So I would mostly just like to say to all the students who are watching this that I hope that they stay inspired and that they stay motivated and eager, and keep that idealist voice in them. I remember one of my professors once saying, in our first year, you're all coming in here and you're all idealists. That's great. You're going to lose it at some point. So try to stick to it as long as you can. Which I can imagine is true. I haven't lost it yet, but I can imagine that there will come a point that you might be done with this uphill battle. But no, I'm very much inspired by the next generation, and I'm sure that you are going to be able to do a lot more in these times and to really push the agenda forward. So I mostly just look forward to seeing what it is that you'll be doing.
Okay, thank you for this beautiful message to end this talk. I really want to thank you for this interesting conversation. And I really think the students watching this will be very much inspired. So
I hope so.
Okay, bye.
Bye.